Persephone Foundation Field Report, File 2. We're set up in Geneva right now, everything's pretty quiet. They think we're part of something called ASIN, so they've given us a pretty decent hotel room in where we're trying to stay and shack up in. No one's given us any problems. They seem to think we're part of an intelligence organization. For now, we're going to play that for what it is. If any problems come with it, we'll bail immediately and try and move somewhere else. So we've gotten some files here in our possession that are going to try to explain a little more detail about the world we're in. So far, it is most definitely different from our own. There are multiple points of divergence, and we're going to try and go through as many as we can. But for right now, I'm just going to run through the factions and forces that are governing this world's policies as best as I can describe. Hopefully someone else can help out soon, but for right now, it's just me and my team. We've got operatives in South and Central America, North America, Africa, and Southeast Asia. You can possibly join in later, but for now, this is just going to be a little more detail on the information we do have. Now, to start with, we have multiple files here involving the group known as the Allied Nations. Now, the Allied Nations formed in 1953 as a measure to try and unify Europe during World War II. When World War II started, many of the Allied Nations member states were completely unorganized. German troops and French troops and British troops all had different tactical ideals, strategic operational objectives, and it was just a mess trying to get everything organized to try and stand against the Russians. Now, what we found is that currently the Allied nations hold a lot of sway in Europe and have a lot of force in North America, as well as member states in Southeast Asia. At present, the Allied nations hold the largest combined military power of any bloc in this timeline. Essentially, if they wanted to march into Moscow and destroy it utterly, no one could stop them if they set their mind to it. Thankfully for the Soviet Union, the Allies are more focused on trying to build peaceful relations with the people under their banner. Now, what we've found about the Allies so far is that they are very focused on technology. They believe that technology can solve all of mankind's ailments. They can solve world hunger, they can solve any kind of disease problems, any kind of struggles politically or economically with the proper application of new technologies and ideals. They're also very socially conscious. It is their belief that mankind can aspire to be better than what it is, and they have already instituted massive sweeping reforms. So far, they've completely undercut the civil rights movement in North America. The fact is that Martin Luther King is not dead. He is now a leader in the Allied nations. Now, the simplest way to describe the Allied nations is that they are roughly analogous to the United Nations of our own timeline. They have peacekeeping operations, they are sent around the world to nations that request them, and they are actually arbiters of maritime law around the world. Even the Soviet Union has sometimes called on the Allied Maritime Court to review cases that they wish to see prosecuted or defended. Even their sworn enemies can trust them in matters of law to be impartial. That says a lot. Now, the Allied nations have multiple member states that do preserve their sovereignty. However, we have noted that in many cases, many Allied nations member states are starting to feel that they are either being suffocated by the Allied nations or that they are not being unified enough, and it has led to some division, which we will touch on later. For now, though, the Allied nations are one of the largest body politics in this world. They have one of the strongest military forces, and they are utterly devoted to the advancement of mankind. Many scientific projects are being developed in the Allied nations that, even in our own timeline, at the present, have not seen any significant advancement yet, and they are using them on the battlefield. The Allied nations are definitely the faction to watch, especially considering they are the ones in control of chronotechnology, the ability to let us warp space and time to travel and teleport. We have to keep an eye on the Allied nations no matter what happens. They are either going to be a threat to be contended with, or possibly allies that can help us move further. Now, after the Allied nations, we have the Soviet Union, which has a history roughly analogous to our own. There was the Russian Revolution, the fall of the Tsar, the rise of Vladimir Lenin, and then Stalin takes power after Lenin's death. However, as we have touched on before, without a Hitler to unify the world against, Stalin decided to try and push communism farther into Western Europe. In 1949, the Soviet Union invaded, they were pushed back, they were defeated,
Then, again, in this timeline at least, the Soviet Union tries to push forward in World War III under the leadership of Premier Cherdenko. However, at the present, the Soviets are licking their wounds and trying to both rebuild their military and try and root out some endemic corruption that has built up over both Stalin and Cherdenko's premierships. It seems that the current premier, a Davidova, is attempting to create a new Russian state similar to the reforms proposed by Khrushchev and even Gorbachev. So far, we're seeing the Soviet Union try to provide the most for its people in exchange for their hard work and loyalty to the state. But we should bear in mind this is still the Soviet Union, so there is a massive system of gulags up in northern Siberia. There are still incredible numbers of operatives patrolling the populace for any kind of disloyal thought. And we have noted that the Soviet Union is also very interested in the Middle East long before the Soviet-Afghan War. It seems the Middle East has, in part, fallen to communism, primarily around Iran, Syria, and Iraq, and they also do support the actions of the North Vietnamese and North Koreans. At the present, the Soviets are trying to build back up their economy. They also are trying, at the present, to emulate some of the successes found by the Allied nations in the theoretical sciences, but at present the Soviets have a greater grasp on the material. They are winning the space race hands down. The Allies may have some presence, but the Soviets have the greatest number of man-made objects in Earth's orbit compared to any other faction. At the present, the Soviets have some military action in the Middle East and some military advisors present in North Vietnam, but other than that, the Soviets are staying where they are right now. After this, we have the Empire of the Rising Sun, which, according to the files we have here, are roughly analogous in three ways to the samurai period of Japan, the militaristic expansion of the Japanese Empire, and a almost transhumanist ideal based around the use of nanotechnology and psychic powers. During World War II, the Empire of the Rising Sun made a small appearance on the world stage after centuries of isolationism. However, it does appear that after that they withdrew again and built up a massive army to strike out at the world when the time was right. The Emperor Yoshiro of the Rising Sun, the third to last emperor that we have noted, believed it was Japan's divine destiny as the Empire of the Rising Sun to take over the world and create a new identity as the ultimate rulers of the planet. They are extremely brutal in warfare. They do not believe in giving quarter or taking any quarter. They are absolutely merciless in their advances, which is completely different from the Japanese nation we have now. It is entirely possible that this is a result of a change in the timeline we have noted, where it seems that the Meiji Restoration failed and imperial loyalists were struck down. It seems that the shogunate loyalists won in the end, and that has affected Japanese history in the Para Echoes timeline ever since. At present, they are the masters of the world economy. They have an ultimate gain in their GDP after World War III, which is something no other nation in this timeline has had. They came out of the war with a huge boost to their economy, and that in itself is astounding. But they also have the ability to utilize psionic powers or psychic powers. They have found a way to unlock hidden potentials in the human mind in this timeline that we have never seen before. We think that if they gain access to time travel, they will be able to do whatever they want, and we cannot allow this to happen. Which is a little troubling, as the Allied nations have put them on what you can call probationary status to become a member state. We will try and see if there's any way we can sabotage this, but at the present, we feel that if they get access to chronotechnology, they will travel as far back in time as they can to affect the development of the world to regain this divine destiny as an empire. Now, it seems that these are the three most powerful factions that we have found in this universe, but the timeline also has many multiple other factions who are just as capable of waging war or affecting the world's economy, and one of the largest we've found right now is the Confederate revolutionaries. Roughly, they are America's counterculture from the 1960s, but with a very militaristic bent. It seems that during World War III, the American president tried to utilize a WMD on Moscow, and the Allied nations had to eliminate him to prevent a massive civilian casualty rate, which to us is odd, but we're trying to find out why it is so unusual that the American president tried to use a WMD on Moscow when it seems that WMDs are used liberally on the battlefield. It may have something to do with the development of warfare in this timeline, but we have no guesses as yet. We'll try and find more information as we can. But after the death of the American president, it seems that things snowballed out of control to the point where many American citizens questioned why they were still a part of the Allied nations in the first place, and in doing so sparked a minor rebellion that decided to declare new sovereignty against the Allied nations and took on a new campaign to try and liberate many American cities and regions from the Allied nations' control. Now, at the present, they are mainly concentrated in the southwest United States, but they also have a sizable naval presence, allowing them to project power around the world. They've also gained many sympathizers in Allied nations member states who believe that the Allied nations have truly overstepped their boundaries for the first time since the formation of the Allied nations, unarguably, in the course of trying to prevent the firing of this WMD at Moscow. We are trying to find any kind of contact with these sympathizers to gain more information, but at the present, the truest heart of Confederate power is in Dallas, Texas. That appears to be the makeshift capital of the Confederacy. They're still in the initial organizing stages of their movement at the present, but they have taken under their wing many left-wing movements in America during the 1960s in our own timeline. They have labor unions, they have civil rights organizers, they have many individuals who believe that the Allies are either not going far enough or who have overstepped their bounds in all the wrong directions. We will consider them a low priority. However, they do have access to something that appears to be able to project an alternate reality onto a current timeline setting. Basically, they're able to take images of one reality and put them into this one. This could be valuable for our own operations in terms of concealing our movements. These are only just 4 of the factions we have found here. We still have at least 12 to go. We're going to try and organize this so that we can go into a little more detail on each faction in the following weeks with in-depth focus on each one individually at a later date. So hopefully we can try and get this all analyzed by the techs and the analysts before too long. We're going to sign out, and hopefully we'll be back next week with 4 other forces present in the world of Para Echoes. Field team signing out.